I'm Chris Wallace. President Trump's lawyer calls for shutting down the special counsel's Russia probe as the Attorney General fires former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe.
We do think that it is well documented that he has had some very troubling behavior and by most accounts a bad actor.
Jeff Sessions moves against McCabe as he faces growing pressure from Republicans to appoint a second special counsel.
The FBI and the Department of Justice were corrupt, in my view, when it came to handling the email investigation of Clinton.
But Robert Mueller continues his investigation, ordering the Trump Organization to hand over documents related to Russia.
We're going to continue to fully cooperate out of respect for the special counsel. We're not going to comment.
We'll discuss it all with Congressman Trey Gowdy, a top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, which found no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. Then, students gear up for their March on Washington. Is Congress any closer to gun and school safety legislation in the wake of the Parkland massacre? Dick Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, joins us.
We did it.
Plus, a big Democratic upset in Pennsylvania's Trump country. We'll ask our Sunday panel what it means for November and about Hillary Clinton's latest take on why she lost. All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We begin with the call from President Trump's personal lawyer to end Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. That just after former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe was fired. That decision by Attorney General Jeff Sessions will likely prevent McCabe from retiring today with his full pension. McCabe says this is all part of the Trump administration's war on the FBI and an effort to undermine the special counsel investigation of the president. We'll get reaction this hour from Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy and Democratic Senator Dick Durbin. But first, to correspondent Peter Ducey with the latest from the White House. Peter.
Chris, we now know that the fired Deputy FBI Director Andy McCabe wrote memos that have now been given to the special counsel Robert Mueller about his private conversations with President Trump, who he blames for a termination that jeopardizes his pension. That's even though the FBI's own disciplinary office recommended McCabe's firing because he made an unauthorized disclosure to a reporter and then lied about it. McCabe says this, quote, "Here's the reality. I am being singled out and treated this way because of the role I played, the actions I took, and the events I witnessed in the aftermath of the firing of James Comey." Well, President Trump just tweeted back about that. He says this, "Spent very little time with Andrew McCabe, but he never took notes when he was with me. I don't believe he made memos except to help his own agenda, probably at a later date. Same with lying James Comey. Can we call them fake memos?" Well, an outraged personal attorney for President Trump, John Dowd, sees an opening. He says this, quote, "I pray that Acting Attorney General Rosenstein will follow the brilliant and courageous example of the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility and Attorney General Jeff Sessions and bring an end to alleged Russia collusion investigation manufactured by McCabe's boss, James Comey, based upon a fraudulent and corrupt dossier. Just end it on the merits in light of recent revelations." That statement got the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's attention. He says this, "The president, the administration, and his legal team must not take any steps to curtail, interfere with, or end the special counsel's investigation, or there will be severe consequences from both Democrats and Republicans." And that is as the Republicans on the House Intel Committee shut down their probe into Russian interference in the 2016 election after finding no evidence of collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign. Chris?
Peter Ducey reporting from the White House. Peter, thanks for that. Now, let's bring in Congressman Trey Gowdy, a top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, which this week found no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the 2016 election. Congressman, I want to begin by getting your reaction to President Trump's lawyer calling for Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, to end the Mueller investigation. Do you support that?
I don't, and I think the president's attorney, frankly, does him a disservice when he says that and when he frames the investigation that way. Chris, if you look at the jurisdiction for Robert Mueller, first and foremost, what did Russia do to this country in 2016? That is supremely important, and it has nothing to do with collusion. So to suggest that Mueller should shut down and that all he is looking at is collusion, if you have an innocent client, Mr. Dowd, act like it. Russia attacked our country. Let Special Counsel Mueller figure that out. And if you believe, as we found, there's no evidence of collusion, you should want Special Counsel Mueller to take all the time and have all the independence he needs to do his job.
But Congressman, it does not appear that John Dowd, the president's lawyer, is freelancing, is going off by himself here. The president has been on a tweet storm this morning. I just want to put up one of his latest tweets, and for the first time he's going after Mueller by name. Here it is. Why does the Mueller team have 13 hardened Democrats, some big crooked Hillary supporters, and 0 Republicans? Another Dem recently added, does anyone think this is fair? And yet there is no collusion. Question, sir, do you think that the gloves are off, that the president and his legal team are now moving against the Mueller investigation, and if they go from tweets to actual effort, actual actions to try to stop the Mueller investigation, what will you and other top Republicans in Congress do?
Well, I hope that's not what's happening. I mean, this is the same Bob Mueller that just indicted, what, a dozen Russians for interfering with our election in 2016. My advice to the president is the same thing I just told his lawyer. Give Bob Mueller the time, the independence, and the resources to do the very job. Keep in mind, Chris, he didn't volunteer for this. He didn't start waving his hand and say, hey, picked me. A Trump-nominated Rod Rosenstein is who picked Bob Mueller. So give him the time, the resources, the independence to do his job. And when you are innocent, if the allegation is collusion with the Russians, and there is no evidence of that, and you're innocent of that, act like it.
But if I may, sir, again, there seems to be a concerted effort by the president and his lawyer to go after the Mueller investigation. If they try to shut it down, what will you and other Republicans in Congress do?
Well, I'm not sure the House can do a lot. We don't have advice and consent. I think the president's going to have a really difficult time nominating and having approved another attorney general. It's going to be I would just counsel the president, it's going to be a very, very long, bad 2018. And it's going to be distracting from other things that he wants to do and was elected to do. Let it play out its course. If you've done nothing wrong, you should want the investigation to be as fulsome and thorough as possible.
Now, Andrew McCabe, the former deputy FBI director who was fired late Friday night, says the reason that he was fired was to undercut his credibility as a potential witness in the Mueller investigation. I want to put up some of Andrew McCabe's statement. This attack on my credibility is one part of a larger effort, not just to slander me personally, but to taint the FBI, law enforcement, and intelligence professionals more generally. It is part of this administration's ongoing war on the FBI and the efforts of the special counsel's investigation, which continue to this day. Congressman, your response.
Oh, Andy McCabe has undercut his credibility all by himself. He didn't need any help doing that. And I find it richly ironic that he is lamenting that those are attacking the FBI when he himself does the exact same thing. It was the FBI who said he made an unauthorized disclosure and then lied about it. That wasn't President Trump. It wasn't me. It wasn't the crazy House Republicans. It was his own fellow FBI agents that said he leaked and then lied about it. So if he's got credibility issues, he needs to look no further than himself.
I just want to go on one point. And look, leaking is improper, and lack of candor, some would call it lying, to investigators, especially under oath, is inexcusable and should be held to account. But my guess is most people would think that what Andy McCabe was involved with leaking was something against the Trump administration. My guess is most people don't know that, in fact, what he asked, he didn't actually leak. He apparently authorized an official to talk to a reporter about was the fact that the FBI wanted to pursue the Clinton Foundation investigation over the objections of the Justice Department.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you look at his statement, he was really upset that he was being blamed for ending something. And the interesting part of his statement, which I hadn't heard a lot of people talk about, is that he was really blaming DOJ. The Department of Justice is who shut down the investigation. But you know what, Chris? We don't live in a relativistic world, and you don't get to pick and choose which rules to abide by, and you don't get to decide when to tell the truth and when not to. I'm going to withhold judgment until Horowitz's report comes out because I don't know precisely what he found.
We should just say Horowitz is the Inspector General.
Right. Who, 2 weeks ago, the president was criticizing, and now all of a sudden McCabe is criticizing. So he probably is doing his job because everyone's criticizing him. Let's wait and see what he found. Let's wait and see what that lack of candor was. And then we can judge the fact pattern and the proportionality of the penalty of his losing his pension. We can judge all that once we understand exactly what he's alleged to have done. But make no mistake, the FBI is who recommended that he be fired. It wasn't crazy House Republicans, and it wasn't the Trump administration. It was his own fellow bureau agents.
Point well taken. All of this, Congressman, comes on the same week that the House Intelligence Committee, on which you're a prominent member, basically ended your investigation of Russian collusion. I want to put up one of the key conclusions from Republican members of your committee. We have found no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians. GOP members also said that while they believe the Russians meddled in the campaign, they did not believe, in fact, they broke with the intelligence community's conclusion that this was an effort by the Russians to benefit the Trump campaign. Question, what's the basis for your conclusion, and you, I say collectively, Republicans on the committee, what's the basis for the conclusion, case closed?
Well, the basis for the conclusion, case closed on no evidence of collusion, is that we've interviewed north of 70 witnesses. And Chris, I personally have asked every one of them, give me any bit of evidence you have, regardless of whether you believe it and regardless of the source, that President Trump colluded, conspired, coordinated with the Russians. And not a single witness, from Susan Rice to Ben Rhodes to Donald Trump Jr. to Jared Kushner, no one has any evidence. I mean, folks who are sympathetic to the president and folks who are antagonistic to the president, not one scintilla of evidence of coordination, collusion, conspiracy between Trump and his campaign and the Russians. So I can't tell you what I don't know. I can just tell you I asked every single witness, and every single witness, including former Obama administration officials, had no evidence of collusion.
But here's the one question I have about this, Congressman. I want to put up some of the people that you and members of your committee never had a chance to talk to. Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, George Papadopoulos. These are some of the central figures in the Mueller investigation. So without having spoken to them, how can you conclude that there was no collusion?
Well, we can't talk to them. They're all under indictment and or have pled guilty, which is why I say there is no evidence. I can't tell you what 4 people I haven't talked to are going to say, but Chris, I can't talk to them. They have a Fifth Amendment right not to talk to Congress. I mean, Steve Bannon's not under indictment and he didn't talk to Congress. So, look, there are lots of things to blame Congress for, but us not knowing what people who won't talk to us are saying should not be one of them. I don't know what Mueller has found, and I've been really clear, leave him alone. Let him do his job. I can tell you within the universe of folks that we've interviewed, there is no evidence of collusion. That's the best I can do. I can't tell you what people I haven't talked to would say.
Here's my only point about this, is that the president is using the House Intelligence Committee's findings in effect as grist, as a defense to say that there was no collusion. And what you're admitting is that there were a lot of key members to this investigation who you've never talked to. So your conclusion is not conclusive.
Well, that's why I always say based on the evidence. And you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what witnesses you haven't talked to or documents you haven't seen. Look, I'm disappointed that Steve Bannon would sit there and be interviewed by a salacious book author, but he wouldn't answer our questions. I'm frustrated by that. But executive branch investigations have more credibility, they have more tools, and that's what I think my fellow citizens ought to be waiting for and have confidence in, not congressional investigations that are run by guys running for the Senate in California who've never met a camera that they didn't fall in love with. That's what you should not have confidence in. Have confidence in the executive branch investigations. And if Mueller finds stuff, more power to him. But the best I can do is interview the people in front of me and ask all relevant questions. And no one has said there was evidence. No one has said that there was collusion.
I want to bring up one final point. but President Trump this week finally imposed sanctions against Russia for meddling in the 2016 election. This after, and I know you voted for it, Congress approved sanctions back last summer, and in fact, the president didn't even impose all of the sanctions that all of you in Congress did authorize him, give him the opportunity to use back last summer. Do you think the president has stood up, has taken action against Vladimir Putin, or do you wish he had been tougher to him?
I think he's done a hell of a lot better job than President Obama did. It wasn't Donald Trump who laughed when Mitt Romney said Russia was our #1 geopolitical enemy, and it wasn't President Trump who handed that awkward reset button to the Russians, and it wasn't President Trump who said on a hot mic, I'll have more flexibility in his second term. All of that was President Obama. So this country can't be tough enough on Russia. They tried to interfere with the fundamentals of our democracy. I mean, their war is not against Democrats or Republicans, it's against Americans. So you cannot be tough enough against Russia, in my judgment. I hope he does more, but he did a hell of a lot more than his predecessor did.
Congressman Gowdy, thank you. Thanks for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Up next, reaction from the #2 Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin, on the McCabe firing, the Russia probe, and the push for gun and school safety on Capitol Hill. A look outside the Beltway at the Chicago River, which was dyed green for St. Patrick's Day, a tradition there since 1962. And joining me now from Chicago, Dick Durbin, the Senate's #2 Democrat. Senator, I want to begin with you, as I began with Congressman Gowdy. What's your reaction to the president's lawyer, John Dowd, urging the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to shut down the Mueller investigation?
Congressman Gowdy's right. We should allow Bob Mueller to complete this investigation. And any effort by the president or by his counsel to stop this investigation needs to be resisted on a bipartisan basis.
Well, let's pick up on that, because when I asked Congressman Gowdy, he said basically the House can't do much about it. What can you do if we go from tweets to an actual move to stop the investigation?
Well, I tell you, I think, quite honestly, Chris, that if the president reaches out and stops this investigation, that is a constitutional crisis in this country. That's been said by Democrats and Republicans alike. And what it means is it would be incumbent on Congress on a bipartisan basis to use the tools at its disposal.
And the tools at its disposal, are you talking about passing a law to try to protect the special counsel, or are you talking about impeachment, sir?
When you think about the obvious, there are 2 bills before the Senate Judiciary Committee, which has been absent without leave on this issue. 2 bills before the committee, bipartisan bills to protect the special counsel. We ought to pass those bills now. This president is engaged in desperate and reckless conduct to intimidate the law enforcement agencies of this country and to try to stop the special counsel. That is unacceptable in a democracy.
I want to pick up on that. When you look at what John Dowd said, when you look at the president's tweets, when you look at the Attorney General firing Andrew McCabe, when you look at the House Intelligence Committee conclusion that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, what do you think is going on here, sir?
Well, I can tell you what's going on with the House Intelligence Committee. Devin Nunes and the Republican majority have squandered their credibility. I respect Congressman Gowdy, but I heard what he said. Based on the witnesses we have talked to, and you gave a long litany of those that they have not even spoken to, based on the evidence they have, they've issued a whitewash and said there was no collusion. I don't know if there was collusion. I know Bob Mueller has access to witnesses, evidence, and information that I don't, and neither does the House Intelligence Committee. In fairness, they should have stepped back and said, let the investigation be completed by Mueller, and we accept the conclusion.
All right, but let's look at the firing of Andrew McCabe, because this was not a case. You talked about listening to Gowdy. He's right. This was not a case of the political appointees of the president going rogue, freelancing, going off on their own. This was the independent inspector general and the disciplinary arm of the FBI, the Office of Professional Responsibility, that said, 1, that McCabe was involved in disclosing information about an ongoing investigation and that he, quote, lacked candor even under oath on multiple occasions. Didn't McCabe need to be held accountable for that?
Common sense and fairness suggest that Congressman Gowdy is right. Let's wait until we see these reports. Let's see how they stack up against the facts as we know them and the statements that are being made by Mr. McCabe. But make no mistake, Chris, it was in December that President Trump announced we have 90 days to get McCabe before he retires. He put out basically a hit on him and said, do this before he qualifies for retirement. Just hours before he would have qualified and left the FBI, this action was taken. It's highly suspicious.
But the Office of Professional Responsibility, the disciplinary arm of the FBI, recommended that he be fired, sir.
What we need to do, as Congressman Gowdy, your Republican guest, said, is to see the actual report itself. I haven't seen it, neither has he.
While we're talking about the 2016 election, your pal, Hillary Clinton, was on a book tour in India this week, and she said that while she won in places in the country that are doing well, that have high GDP, that things are very different for the Trump voters. Here she is.
And his whole campaign, Make America Great Again, was looking backwards. You know, you didn't like black people getting rights. You don't like women, getting jobs. You don't want to, see that Indian American succeeding more than you are. Whatever your problem is, I'm going to solve it.
Senator, is that helpful to Democrats in 2018 to have Hillary Clinton dismissing the 60 million plus voters who supported and elected Donald Trump, dismissed, some could say even condemned, as racists and misogynists?
No, it's not helpful at all. And in fact, my friend Hillary Clinton is wrong. 30% of the people who voted for Donald Trump had voted for President Obama. Why? The same people who looked for change with President Obama thought there wasn't enough as far as their personal lives were concerned, and they supported Donald Trump. That is a reality that Democrats acknowledge. That's why we are focusing on issues to address this concern they have about the economic insecurity that many working families face. I can tell you a tax bill that gave tax breaks to the wealthiest people in America under the Republicans and President Trump is not responsive to that concern.
Heidi Heitkamp, one of your Senate Democratic colleagues who's running for re-election in the red state of North Dakota, said Hillary Clinton can't go away soon enough. Is she right? And should Hillary Clinton go away?
Well, I can tell you, Hillary Clinton, like every American, has the right to express her point of view, and she obviously gets press coverage. But we are moving on to the next chapter in American history. We have a new Democratic leadership and more people aspiring to be a candidate in 2020 and cast characters completely.
I want to turn to your day job. Hundreds of thousands of students are marching on Washington next Saturday, marching on cities across the country, demanding gun and school safety. But as we sit here right now, more than a month after the Parkland school shooting massacre, Congress, all of you, and I mean that collectively, Republicans and Democrats, have done almost nothing. Haven't you failed these students?
No, and I'll tell you why. The Democrats are prepared to move forward. We have said to these students and to America, we are in support of universal background checks. The Republicans have not said that. The president has reversed his position, as usual, on this issue within a matter of days. We have also said that we need to do something about these high-capacity magazines and the assault weapons that are being used to kill children in classrooms. We've tried to make it abundantly clear that we believe there are ways to plug the loopholes in our current system to stop those who are mentally unstable and those who are disqualified from coming into possession of firearms. The Senate Judiciary Committee, which I'm proud to serve on, has been absent without leave. I challenged the chairman of the committee this week. For goodness sakes, this is our jurisdiction. Why aren't we holding a hearing on universal background checks? So far, he has refused.
Well, let me ask you about two things that House Republicans have passed that are on the plate in the Senate, having passed the House. One is a school safety bill. One is to improve the background check system. Would you support those?
I can tell you this, Chris, 17 lives in Florida in that school are worth more than the proposals that have been made by the Republicans. It's weak soup. Let's do something that'll make America safer. Listen, we had a situation here in Chicago. Captain Paul Barr, gunned down in the Loop in Chicago, a brave man who gave his life to defend this city. The gun that was used to kill him was a gun that was sent in commerce without background checks on 2 different occasions. What they have proposed in the House would not even touch that reality. Let's pass a universal background check that will work.
I understand that it's not as far as you want to go, but it's something that would pass. Are you willing to pass that, or is it your feeling that this just lets Republicans off the hook, and as a result, you're going to end up with nothing?
About once every 8 years, we get around to this issue. Now's the time to do something significant. Stop the phony political posturing of going just a little step, a toe in the water. Let's do something that'll make America safe. It isn't safe if you can buy a gun over the internet without a background check. It isn't safe if you can buy a gun at a gun show without a background check. America understands that. 97% of Americans support it. Even gun owners support it. But the Republican leadership in the House and Senate have stopped us from bringing that measure to the floor.
All right, I got about a minute left. I want to talk about one more subject because we're back here again. Next Friday, the government once again runs out of money, and in the effort to pass a spending bill that will keep the government funded until October 1st, Democrats are saying they are not going to use the leverage of passing that bill to try to get a DACA fix. Is that true? And if that is true, if you're not going to insist on a DACA fix as part of that spending bill, aren't you, the Democrats, abandoning the Dreamers?
President Trump was the one who abolished the DACA program on September the 5th. President Trump has rejected 6 different bipartisan proposals to pass a law and solve the problem he created. He is the key to solving the DACA problem. I have spoken to the leaders on both sides of the aisle, House and Senate, begging them to do something and do it now for DACA, even included in the omnibus bill. But the president's approval to move forward is critical for the Republicans to be willing to
it's a yes or no. Are you going to insist on a DACA fix as part of this bill, or are you going to let the bill pass, avoid a shutdown, and do nothing about DACA?
We're not going to have a shutdown, but I'm urging the leaders to basically come together and understand there is an emergency at hand here. 780,000 young people have their lives hanging in the balance because President Trump killed the DACA program. We have to move on a bipartisan basis to put it back in business.
Senator Durbin, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Good talking to you.
Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to discuss the latest developments in the Russia investigation and talk of more turmoil in the Trump staff and cabinet. Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about continuing shakeups in the White House? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.
I've come away believing that it was shoddily done, that there were conflicts of interest, that there was political bias that may have resulted in giving Clinton a pass. And the reason we want a special counsel is I think crimes may have been committed.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham calling for a second special counsel to investigate alleged corruption in the FBI's handling of both the Clinton and Trump investigations. And it's time now for our Sunday group. GOP strategist Karl Rove, Charles Lane of The Washington Post, Fox News analyst Marie Harf, and former Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz. Congressman, it seems to me that the big story this week, and in fact, I think for the last several weeks, has been a fight for control of the larger narrative. The Republicans say the big story is what the FBI did. Democrats say the big story is what Donald Trump did. What do you think the big story is?
I think it's yet to be written because I think the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, his 450 employees that work there, is about a week or two away from actually having a final report. And that'll sort of dismiss every other narrative that's out there because the one with the most credibility is still yet to be written, and that will be the Inspector General. And you've seen part of that play out. But when you ask a Democrat what's the single best piece of evidence that Donald Trump colluded, they don't have anything, nothing.
So what about, you say, the single best piece of evidence or the single big story is the Inspector General? What about the special counsel?
Well, I think that is, and you saw Trey Gowdy fully support Mr. Mueller, and I think that is the right decision. I don't think what Donald Trump's attorney is doing and saying helps the situation. As Trey Gowdy pointed out, if you're innocent, act like you're innocent. And doing these calls to get rid of the special counsel at this point, when it was appointed by somebody that you appointed, Rod Rosenstein, I don't think plays well.
Chuck, are Republicans, whether we're talking about the president's lawyer, some Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee, are they trying to short circuit the Mueller investigation? And if the FBI was as corrupt and biased as there's some evidence it was, should that maybe happen?
Well, obviously, if we have a corrupt FBI, yeah, something should be done about that. But I don't think we do have a corrupt and biased FBI. At least that's not the fundamental problem, if any, with the Mueller investigation. Going back to what Congressman Chaffetz just said, when this whole thing began, when the Mueller investigation began, I thought, okay, Donald Trump has just gotten a break. Now the whole thing can be, the whole issue can be parked over here with this independent guy and allowed to run its course, and he can move on to other things. But from the beginning, he has been refusing to accept that break, so to speak, and instead has cast doubt on its integrity, has repeatedly raised the prospect that he will in some way, as you say, short-circuit it, fire Robert Mueller, et cetera, et cetera. It's a great mystery unless one of two things is happening, and I hate to make political analysis amateur psychology. He just can't control himself. Or two, there's some political benefit to him from doing this, that in some way this plays well to his base and will help.
But what about the FBI component of it? As has been pointed out repeatedly now, this wasn't Jeff Sessions just going off on his own on McCabe.
Right.
This was the Inspector General in the Office of Professional Responsibility. It wasn't Jeff Sessions who wrote the Peter Struck Lisa Page memos, texts. It was these two lead FBI officials. I mean, there clearly was a problem of bias inside the FBI.
There's something not kosher going on in the FBI, and I think the strongest piece of that is this McCabe piece, because we have an independent body, as close as you can get in this town these days, saying Andrew McCabe made a mistake and he deserved to be fired. He can't get around that. I just think there's two separate buckets here. One is whatever may have been going on with the Clinton investigation, which was the substance under the Andy McCabe stuff, and Peter Strzok's potential bias in that, and so forth and so on. And then over here, a whole other narrative, which is Russia and Mueller, and I don't think they necessarily cross each other.
Carl, what do you think of the president's personal lawyer yesterday going out and calling for shutting down the Mueller investigation? And what do you think of the president today? Just a tweet storm of attacks against, by name, the Mueller investigation.
I took John Dowd's statement as client management, managing his client, President Trump, by saying bad things about Mueller, making his client feel good. The president's tweets today are not useful. I agree with Congressman Gowdy. If you're innocent, act innocent. And we have every bit of evidence thus far is that there is no evidence of collusion, conspiracy, or coordination with the Russians. And the president is about ready to have two big things handed to him that are enormous. One is the outcome of the Inspector General's report on the handling of the Clinton investigation, which I think is going to show real problems inside the FBI in the handling of the email investigation. And that will put the Democrats on the defensive and the president on the offensive. And second of all, the Office of Professional Responsibility, acting upon a referral from the independent Inspector General, say McCabe ought to go. The president should have been quiet with that and let that information soak in on its own without gloating and without tweeting. The president can can benefit from this by withdrawing himself from it, not by grabbing it, holding it close to him, and screaming and shouting via tweet that he's moving forward.
Another big story this week was the firing, and it's amazing to think it happened this week, the firing of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and rampant rumors about a, quote, bloodbath in the White House and the Trump administration. We got this on Twitter from Lee Geller. I'd like to know, why is it such a bad thing? I think as a businessman, the president, expects results, and if something isn't working, he changes it. Isn't that exactly what the people voted for, someone from the outside to shake things up? Marie, how do you answer Lee, and how do you feel, as somebody who used to work in the State Department under a different secretary, how do you feel Rex Tillerson was treated?
Well, I think that some chaos is helpful because you can get your people in. The president has the prerogative to do that. This is not normal turnover. And this level of chaos, people getting fired on Twitter, not knowing if the chief of staff will be there next week, is not helpful for governing. I think at the State Department, a lot of my former colleagues are happy to see Tillerson go. They know he was not close with the president. He also didn't do a lot to endear himself with the workforce. He didn't really invest in it. On the other hand, they're a little worried about Pompeo because he has expressed hawkish views on things like the Iran deal. He hasn't put a lot of credibility and diplomacy historically. So in his confirmation hearing, they will be looking to see whether he actually wants to be a diplomat or whether he will continue down this more hawkish route. I think people still have a bit of an open question about Pompeo at the State Department.
You sound like you want to say something.
I thought it was poor form. You have somebody as the Secretary of State who's put his whole career on the line to serve as the Secretary of State. I don't think you should be on the receiving end of a tweet to say that you're dismissed. At the same time, I do believe that you want to have somebody who's reflective of the president, and Mike Pompeo fits that bill. He served with us in the House. A lot of people on Capitol Hill believe him, trust him. I think he's done great things at the CIA, and I think it'll be a marvelous and great Secretary of State.
I was going to say, and excuse me for this, but the Striped Pants group at the State Department may not like what Pompeo says about Iran, but what he's saying about Iran is what the president's saying about Iran, right?
He will be reflective of the president.
That's right, but I think it's clear to all of us that President Trump is surrounding himself with people that he's more ideologically aligned with, especially on foreign policy. That will also be true.
Well, isn't that what presidents do?
Sometimes they like this sort of team of rivals model. If he gets rid of H.R. McMaster, who's more of a mainstream Republican foreign policy thinker, and replaces him with someone who's a little more hawkish, I think it will show that the policy may be changing in the next year of the administration.
Speculation was so rampant about major turnover. There was talk about the chief of staff, about the national security advisor, 3 or 4 cabinet members, that White House spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders had to put out this statement.
The chief of staff actually spoke to a number of staff this morning, reassuring them that there were personnel changes, no immediate personnel changes at this time, and that people shouldn't be concerned.
Carla, as someone who worked in a White House, have you ever seen anything like this, and does it matter?
It does matter because the president wants to have people focused on their jobs and not worried about losing their jobs. And they want to also be felt that they're being treated with respect. The fact that John Kelly calls the Secretary of State on Friday night and says there's going to be a change, and the change is made by tweet on Tuesday morning, and the president finally calls the secretary at noon from Air Force One and says, thanks for your service, is troubling. I mean, and not only that, but it's troubling for the administration. The president said he wanted to make this change because of the upcoming meeting with Korea, so he could have a new face in place by the time of the meeting with Korea. Does anybody think that Mike Pompeo is going to be confirmed by the United States Senate in a matter of 5 or 6 weeks? No, the Democrats are going to use this as an opportunity to make the administration bleed, and even more so given the way that it was done. And the president could have done this in a different way after the meeting in May. He could have had Pompeo deeply involved in the preparations for the meeting, done it in a way that made it more attractive for people to come into service by announcing it at a Rose Garden ceremony with Tillerson and Pompeo standing with him, complimenting Tillerson for his service and acknowledging the new role that Pompeo was going to be. Instead, we get it all done by tweet, and it doesn't look good.
This is the alternative universe, but Donald Trump has shown repeatedly he doesn't like being handled. And I think some of the people he's pushing out now are people he perceives as people like Tillerson who are imposed upon him by the Republican establishment to handle him.
Well, and we're also seeing him fire people using the methods he used on The Apprentice, which may have worked for reality TV, but not good for governing.
All right. Well, it's pretty good for television. All right, panel, we have to take a break here. When we come back, a dramatic upset in Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district. What does Democrat Connor Lamb's win signal for the midterm elections? And Hillary Clinton is still explaining her loss to Donald Trump, and people in her party can't run away fast enough.